created a perception of the military involved in domestic politics. As a commissioned uniformed officer, it was a mistake that I have learned from, and I sincerely hope we all can learn from it.
Hi again, everybody. It's now 5 o'clock in New York. It takes a lot for any human being to admit a mistake, probably an extra a lot for a man of his stature, a man in uniform, to make that kind of declaration publicly, just to own it. But I show it to you because it demonstrates just how far General Mark Milley, who was then the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, wanted to separate himself from what he did and how much he wanted to separate the military, the United States military, from domestic politics. General Milley made that televised apology after he was photographed with then President Trump walking through Washington, D.C.'s Lafayette Square, following authorities who were using tear gas to clear peaceful protest. So the idea that General Milley would say or do anything ever again that would give even the slightest sense that he would ever again make that mistake and wade into politics is important to have in mind. It illustrates, I think it's the most public-facing piece of evidence of his degree of alarm now, today, about this, our election. In newly revealed conversations between General Milley and the author Bob Woodward, written about in Bob Woodward's new book, War, General Milley felt compelled to clarify and articulate his concern about the future of our country should Donald Trump ever return to power. He cornered Bob Woodward at a 200-person reception in March 2023 and said this, quote, "He is the most dangerous person ever. I had suspicions when I talked to you about his mental decline, and so forth. But now I realize he's a total fascist. He is the most dangerous person to this country," end quote. A fascist to the core, General Milley repeated. Bob Woodward said he will never forget the intensity of Milley's worry in that moment. Now, this should be stop everything stuff, right? Truly stunning words out of the mouth of one of the most respected people in this country, one of the most respected people who's ever served our country. And we should focus on them because we have them now. And we're just 21 days out from this hugely consequential election. And those words were uttered by a man who devoted his entire life, literally decades, protecting the men and women who served under him and all of us who went about our lives, protecting the American people by upholding the U.S. Constitution. At his retirement ceremony last year, General Milley nodded to Donald Trump's anti-democratic impulses, but did so without naming names.
We don't take an oath to a country. We don't take an oath to a tribe. We don't take an oath to a religion. We don't take an oath to a king or a queen or to a tyrant or a dictator. And we don't take an oath to a wannabe dictator.
A wannabe dictator. Only one guy that fits that description. And we have that. We have that information. And now we have this from Woodward's book. Now, Milley's warning to Bob Woodward that the man running to be our commander-in-chief is, quote, fascist to the core, General Milley's words, holds even more weight over these past few days as we've heard the ex-president's mask slip and publicly call Americans who disagree with Donald Trump and MAGA, quote, the enemy within, end quote. Trump's rhetoric so dangerous that Vice President Kamala Harris highlighted it during her...
A huge risk for America and dangerous. Donald Trump is increasingly unstable and unhinged. And he is out for unchecked power. That's what he's looking for.
Clarity. Vice President Kamala Harris is giving you clarity to choose whomever you would like in November, but you will have clarity, and so is General Mark Milley. He's given it to Bob Woodward. He's given it at that speech about a wannabe dictator, right? Harris is right now taping a live radio conversation with Charlemagne the God in Detroit. We'll bring you some of those comments. They're available as soon as they get underway. We'll show them to you. We'll play them for you as soon as we have them. But the current GOP presidential nominee being, according to the former chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, a, quote, fascist, who is, quote, the most dangerous person to the country, is where we start the hour with some of our most valued and favorite experts and friends. Retired four-star general and MSNBC military analyst Barry McCaffrey's here, and CEO of Iraq and Afghanistan Veterans of America, Allison Jaslow, is here. Barry McCaffrey, I start with you. Your thoughts on what we have in terms of information. I feel like we've wasted a lot of time waiting for the event where they announced their endorsement of Kamala Harris when all the information is staring us right in the face.
Sure. This is all out in the open. You got to go back to 2020 when it was clear to me and other observers, and I was saying this on NBC News, that Trump was setting up, obviously, the potential for a coup against the Constitution of the United States to seize the election. He had an acting Secretary of Homeland Security. He had an acting Attorney General. He had an acting Secretary of Defense. He tried to fire the CIA director and put an acting director in there. And we should also remind ourselves that the chairman of the JCS, General Mark Milley at the time, but continuing, has no command authority over the armed forces at all. He's an advisor to the president, the Secretary of Defense, and the National Security Council. And so when Secretary Mark Esper was fired and disappeared, and a retired lieutenant colonel functionary of Trump appeared as the acting SecDef, not confirmed by the Senate, the legal chain of command was Trump and this retired lieutenant colonel. So we got to understand that there was a potential for essentially an armed insurrection suppression of an election. Mark Milley, 100 years from now, is going to be studied as a figure of integrity and principle in helping, along with the media and many Republican politicians, in saving the country.
Allison, let me read you more about General Milley's life since retiring, as reported by Bob Woodward. Quote, since retiring, Milley had received a nonstop barrage of death threats that he, at least in part, attributes to Trump's repeated aggressive attempts to discredit him. Quote, he is inciting people to violence with violent rhetoric, Milley told his wife. Quote, but he does it in such a way, it's through the power of suggestion, which is exactly what he did on the 6th of January. As a former chairman, Milley was provided round-the-clock government security for 2 years, but he had taken additional precautions at significant personal expense, installing bulletproof glass and blast-proof curtains at his home. This is the world that Trump has wrought for the former chairman of the Joint Chiefs, General Mark Milley.
Yeah, it's terrifying. I mean, I can't even imagine reading about putting the bulletproof glass in his home, which, you know, obviously he's somebody who served in the military, has been to war, but, you know, certainly his family isn't battle hardened like the general is. But, you know, this also brings up an important point as to what my organization is currently involved in terms of the work of what we're undergoing is traveling across the country right now with our partner Democracy First, bringing together veterans and their neighbors to have conversations about the future of our democracy here. And one of the key tenets we are trying to get citizens across the country to agree to is not supporting any elected leaders or candidates who will incite political violence, that there has to be a red line there. And so there's a real movement. I think it's great that somebody like General Milley is speaking out from his perch, but I really think that it's your everyday veterans, the veterans who live down the street from you, who really need to rise up in this moment and call for better in our country so that we can have a brighter future than the one we feel like we're living in right now.
General McCaffrey, let me show you how Governor Walz is trying to do what else, and just articulate it.
So I have to tell you, as someone who wore this nation's uniform proudly, as someone who now is the commander-in-chief of the Minnesota National Guard, the idea of sending U.S. military personnel against American citizens makes me sick to my stomach. I'll tell you what, We'll let the lawyers decide if what he said was treason, but what I know is it's a call for violence, plain and simple. And it's pretty damn un-American, if you ask me. So look, if anybody wants to pretend that this is a normal conversation that Donald Trump is having, just dispel that. The former chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, Mark Milley, said, "No one has ever been more dangerous to this country than Donald Trump, and he is a fascist to his core." Let that sink in, and don't be a damn bit afraid of saying it, because that's exactly who he is. That's exactly who he is.
General McCaffrey, what I want to ask you is, do you think this is as close that we will come to hearing this from General Milley? I mean, do you think he'll be content? I mean, this book's been out a week. I didn't jump on this the day it came out. I mean, I thought for some reason it isn't true. General Milley knows how to set the record straight. It's been out there now for several days. Do you think that he'll be content letting Bob Woodward be the deliverer of his belief that Donald Trump is, quote, fascist to his core?
Well, I think a lot of these people who served with Trump are very reluctant to become part of the election machinery of contention. You know, this General Kelly, 4-star Marine, White House Chief of Staff, worked directly with Trump, has also denounced him as unfit to be President of the United States. Secretary Jim Mattis, retired 4-star Marine, one of the most influential figures, combat figures in the U.S. military since World War II, has also denounced Trump as dangerous to the Constitution. So I don't think we need to rely upon Mark Milley on a day-in, day-out message basis to continue the message. This fellow is clearly, if I'm a student of military history, this is 1930s in Germany in many ways, and many of the MAGA supporters that I hear from and read about are articulating the same message, using the armed forces of the United States against domestic enemies and deporting millions of refugees in this country illegally here or not back to where they come from, using the armed forces of the United States. This is not the purpose of the U.S. Armed Forces. This is incredibly unsettling, dangerous rhetoric by someone whose character is unfit to be the commander-in-chief of the armed forces.
I mean, Allison, I guess I asked the question about whether General Milley would be content to let Bob Woodward deliver the message, because Trump is going after the press as well. And the truth is, the press is a vehicle for communicating Milley's belief that Trump is, quote, fascist to the core, is fine as long as there is a press. But here's what Trump plans should he be reelected. This is him at the Economic Club of Chicago today attacking the press.
It's only bad because of the fake news, because the news is really fake. That's the one we really have to straighten. We have to straighten out our press because we have a corrupt press.
And actually, Allison, let me show you a little bit of what the press was trying to elicit from him clarity on. This is Trump talking about the peaceful transfer of power.
Only 3 weeks to go to the election. Will you commit now to respecting and encouraging a peaceful transfer of power?
Well, you had a peaceful transfer of power.
You had a peaceful transfer of power. You had a peaceful... Come on, President Trump. You had a peaceful transfer of power compared with Venezuela, but it was by far the worst transfer of power for a long time.
Thank you. I appreciate that, because this is what they like to do. This is what they like to do. And it's very interesting.
The question, President Trump, is would you respect the decision?
When I found out about this interview, I did a little check. He's a man that has not been a big Trump fan over the years. The primary scene in Washington was hundreds of thousands, the largest group of people I've ever spoken before, and I've spoken before. And it was love and peace. And some people went to the Capitol, and a lot of strange things happened there. I'll tell you what. Those people that did go down, which was a tiny fraction of the people that went to Washington, not one of those people had a gun. Nobody was killed except for Ashley Babbitt.
I mean, Allison, his own Secret Service radio traffic revealed that lots of people were carrying AR-style weapons, someone wearing fatigues hanging in a tree between the White House and the Capitol, and several law enforcement officials died by suicide in the days that ensued. So none of that is true, but importantly, using the press is fine as long as there is a free press. And I wonder your thoughts on this notion that General Milley believes Trump is fascist to the core. And at this point, our narrator for that will be Bob Woodward.
Well, General Milley is a man of character. I certainly wasn't in the rooms that he was in that led him to that conclusion, but I'm inclined to believe him and take him at his word. I think as it relates to the press and the free press, I'm somebody who cares deeply about this country. And I think a strong fourth estate, a healthy fourth estate is essential to our democracy and the future of our nation. And I also think that, whether it's the current president or the former president, unfortunately, there are also photographers in the press. And so one can try and split hairs as to unfair coverage by reporters, but when the American people are able to see with their own eyes what happened on January 6th or what happened at Kabul when we were pulling out of Afghanistan, like, the photos speak for themselves. So, honestly, that any politician or any elected leader would try to tell people that they can't believe what they're seeing with their own eyes. We have photos and video.
And because we've been talking about General Milley, I do want to read from his resignation letter drafted in June, days after Lafayette Square. Of course, he would continue to serve, but this was obtained by the media. Quote, "You are using the military to create fear in the minds of the people, and we are trying to protect the American people. I cannot stand idly by and participate in that attack, verbally or otherwise, on the American people. The American people trust their military, and they trust us to protect them against all enemies, foreign and domestic, and our military will do just that. We will not turn our back on the American people." General Barry McCaffrey and Allison Jaslow, extraordinary times, and we're really grateful to have your expertise and your wisdom on this. Thank you so much for starting us off. When we come back, we'll bring in our panel here at the table on the significance of high-level military leaders speaking out through the media or otherwise about what they saw during the first Trump administration, how Vice President Kamala Harris is making that case and playing those clips and bringing the receipts. About popular radio host Charlemagne the God is taking place in Detroit, and we can listen in. Let's do that.
Who have broken the law. And this is no small issue, this piece, in addition to everything else, because as we know, we've seen plenty of examples of a police officer who committed misconduct in one jurisdiction and then goes to another jurisdiction and gets hired because there's no place that's tracking their misconduct. So these are some of the things that we've done. And then, listen, I'm still going to always work on getting the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act passed. Part of the work that I'm doing as a candidate for President of the United States includes lifting up those candidates who are running either for re-election or for the first time to Congress, who are supportive of what we need to do on all of the issues we've been discussing, whether it be freedom to vote and passing the John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act, whether it be freedom to make decisions about your own body, whether it be the freedom to just be and be free from any brutality, including police brutality when and where it occurs.
I think a lot of the frustration comes from people who will say sometimes politicians volunteer lies because, yes, it's great to try to pass the George Floyd Policing Act, but you probably know you can't get the votes. So why push that? Why push that on people? No, you can't get the votes.
I don't subscribe to that approach, and I'm going to tell you why. It took a long time for the Voting Rights Act to get done. It took the brutality of what happened when John Lewis and all those were trying to cross the Edmund Pettus Bridge. It took a lot of work over our history to do what we have accomplished thus far. And we have to remain committed.
How do you convince Republican senators, as you just said?
Well, part of it, part of it is that their constituents are part of this. I mean, we have plenty of folks who want this, who live in districts where they serve. And this is the point. This gets back to the earlier point about you can't let anybody take you out of the game by not voting. The solutions, and maybe this is the point you're making about what President Obama said. The solutions are not going to happen just overnight. And the solutions that we all want are not going to happen in totality because of one election. But here's the thing. The things that we want and are prepared to fight for won't happen if we're not active and if we don't participate. We cannot allow circumstances to take us out the game, because then basically what we're saying is all those people who are obstructionists, who are standing in the way of change, they're winning. Because they're convincing people that it can't be done, so take yourself out. Don't participate. Look at that circle. Look at that vicious circle then. So let's not fall for it.
Zeke, this is my man Zeke. He's the president and CEO of New Era Detroit. He wants to talk to you about your blackmail agenda for the black community. Or just your agenda for the black community, period. Zeke, what's up, brother?
What up, though? What up, though? Madam Vice President, Charlamagne the God. What up, though? And welcome to Detroit.
Yes, sir.
It's good to be back.
I like to say the real Detroit because I'm up in here. My name is Zeke, New Era founder, CEO. I've worked on the ground here in Detroit and in black communities all across the country for over the past 10 years, actually celebrating our 10th year this past August.
All right.
In my 10 years of organizing, we played a major role in the resurgence of pride and the change in mindset in Detroit neighborhoods across the city. We're not only known for the work that we do here in Detroit, but across the country in black communities, having worked in over 35 cities of the blackest cities in America. Saying all that to say, I'm extremely qualified to sit in front of the current vice president and which can be the next president of the United States of America. As I pose my question to you, I would first like to make it known that I don't have any emotional connections to politicians. I believe that this is one of our biggest flaws in the current political process. I view politics as a business, and America is one of the biggest corporations in the world. With that being said, I'm here on behalf of the business of the black community. With all that black Americans have been through and contribute to the success of America, I feel that there should be an in-depth investigation or evaluation of the lack of resources and current living conditions in black communities nationwide. My question to you is, what's your stance on reparations? We all know that America became great, off the backs of free black labor. How progressive are you on making it a priority and righting America's wrongs? It's understood that you are running for president for all people of America. Asking for specifics for black communities doesn't mean don't do for others, but black Americans are heavily asked to vote Democrat in every election for over half a century with very little in return. What are your plans to address these very important issues and change that narrative?
Thank you, Zeke.
I appreciate that. Thank you. And thank you for your work. So to your point, yes, I am running to be a president for all Americans. That being said, I do have clear eyes about the disparities that exist and the context in which they exist, meaning history, to your point. So my agenda, well, first of all, on the point of reparations, it has to be studied. There's no question about that. And I've been very clear about that position. In terms of my immediate plan, I will tell you a few of the following. One, as it relates to the economy, which is a lot of what you have addressed. Look, I grew up in the middle class. My mother, worked hard, raised me and my sister. And by the time I was in high school, she was able to afford our first home. I know what it means for an individual and a family to have home ownership. I also know, in the context of history, nobody got 40 acres and a mule. We have a history of a number of things, including redlining. Detroit knows it well. A history of, for example, something that still exists that I've worked on to address, which is racial bias in home appraisals. And we know home ownership is, black families are 40% less likely to be homeowners than others. And that home ownership is one of the surest ways to build intergenerational wealth, right? Because when you own a home, that's when if your child says, Daddy, I want to go to college, you can say, sweetheart, don't have to take out a loan. I'll take some equity out of the house. Or if your child says, I want to start a small business, same point, right? So my plan includes making sure that for first-time home buyers, they have a $25,000 down payment assistance to just get their foot in the door, because we know folks will work hard, they'll save, and pay that monthly mortgage. Second point is to bring down the cost of housing generally, because one of the issues is we have a housing supply shortage, and so that's about working with the private sector. In terms of our small businesses, which are part of the backbone of the economy of the Black community and part of the backbone of America's economy writ large. My second mother, the woman who helped raise us, was a small business owner. I know who our small business owners are, and I have convened Black small business owners way before I was running for president in my official office at the White House to talk with young entrepreneurs, mostly young, about the work that they are doing that is about clean energy work, technology, as well as the traditional, whether it be a barbershop or a restaurant. One of the big issues facing Black entrepreneurs and Black small businesses is access to capital. Because unlike my opponent, who got handed $400 million on a silver platter and then filed bankruptcy 6 times, don't forget that, calls himself a businessman. Not everybody has access to the capital, but we know in the community we do not lack for ambition, aspirations, dreams, hard work ethic. And so my work has been as vice president to increase billions of dollars into community banks. And as vice president, part of that work will also be to change the tax deduction for startup small businesses from $5,000 to $50,000, because nobody can start a small business on $5,000. And if you don't otherwise have intergenerational wealth, how are you going to be able to do it? Second point on small business is this. I'm going to do, basically, it's a program that is about a $20,000 non-refundable loan to to basically businesses that don't have access to wealth and don't have those relationships, which is going to directly impact a lot of small business, Black-owned small businesses. That $20,000 non-refundable loan is what would help somebody if they need to buy equipment, right? If they need to buy an extra truck, depending on what that business is, which we know that's a big part of what holds back our small businesses. Just having enough capital to actually pay for the things that allow you to then put your hard work into play to actually grow your business. The other piece, and this is something that is critically important, is to see Black folks, and in particular Black men, as a whole human being, and understand that we are talking about sons, we are talking about fathers, we are talking about grandsons, we're talking about grandparents, we're talking about uncles. And so I say that as a preface to say 2 other things, and then I'll keep going. One, to deal with, I mean, you like that? You caught that.
Okay, filibuster, ma'am.
To deal with health care for Black people and Black men in particular. We know that we still have a lot of work to do to increase, for example, the high risk that we have for colon cancer, for prostate cancer, right? And to increase screenings and to make sure that people are actually going to get the screenings. Not to mention the higher risk for sickle cell. So part of my agenda is about what we will do to deal with and highlight what we've got to do to focus on Black men's health. And then a similar point is this. 40% of caregivers are men. And we know culturally we take care of our elders. And we have a lot of men in the community who are in the sandwich generation, who are trying to take care of their young kids and take care of an elder parent or relative. And it's overwhelming for people to be able to do both. And a lot of people have to end up thinking about leaving their job to just do it.
That's right.
So my plan is this. 1, in order for people to then afford assistance for hiring healthcare, home healthcare, they basically have to go broke to be eligible for Medicaid. My plan is this. Let's have Medicare. And this is, I've mapped it out and we can make it work. Mm-hmm.
But that's just your story.
It's my story. Mm-hmm. Look, I've been in this race 70 days. Some people are just getting to know me. Yep. Other people have known me. Mm-hmm. And I owe it. Listen, I feel very strongly I need to earn every vote, which is why I'm here having this candid conversation with you and your listeners. Mm-hmm. I have to earn people's support, and I am working to do that.
Before we go to another talkback call, I want to say there was a time I had a politician tell me once that if you're running for a national election, it's bad electoral strategy to say you are going to do things specifically for Black people, which is why a lot of politicians don't speak directly to their plans for Black people. Is that a thing?
I don't know that that's true. I think that what is true is that I am running to be a president for everybody, but I am clear-eyed about the history and the disparities that exist for specific communities, and I'm not going to shy away from that. It doesn't mean that my policies aren't going to benefit everybody, because they are. Everything I just talked about will benefit everybody. Small business owners, whatever their race, their age, their gender, their geographic location, are going to benefit from the fact that I'm going to extend tax deductions to $50,000. Every first-time homeowner, wherever they are, whatever their race, will benefit if they are a first-time home buyer with a $25,000 down payment assistance. Everyone is going to benefit from my plan to extend the child tax credit to $6,000 for the first year of their child's life. That's going to benefit everybody. But I do realize, again, that on the issue of home ownership, for example, Black people are 40% less likely to own a home. So,
do you, do you feel like President Obama stepped on your rollout? Because I know you've been working on this blackmail agenda for a long time, and you've been doing the outreach, with your, what was the Opportunity Economy Tour and things like that. But then he made the statements that he made last week, so everybody thinks this is a reaction to that.
Oh, no. I mean, you just have to, no, obviously not. I've been doing this for quite some time, including before I was running for president.
Let's go to Talkback, Eddie.
Hi, I'm Bobby from Georgia, and I have a question for Kamala Harris. Could you please respond to Trump's claim that he's going to use the Alien Enemies Act of 1798 to round up immigrants if he wins the election? This law was last used to put Asian Americans in internment camps during World War II, and I have a sneaking suspicion that if Trump wins, he's going to use this law to put anyone that doesn't look white in camps, and I'm scared.
Yeah, so you've hit on a really important point and expressed it, I think, so well, which is he is achieving his intended effect to make you scared. He is running full time on a campaign that is about instilling fear, not about hope, not about optimism, not about the future, but about fear. And so this is yet another example. Look what he did in saying that those legal immigrants in Springfield, Ohio, were eating their pets. And by the way, the hypocrisy of it abounds, because on the issue of immigration, let's be clear, some of the most conservative members of the United States Congress, working with others, came up with a border security bill, which was the strongest, toughest border security bill in a long, long time. It would have put 1,500 more border agents at the border. It would have reduced the flow of fentanyl into our country, which is killing people all over our country of every race and background. It would have allowed us to do more work on prosecuting transnational criminal organizations, which I have done in my career. Trump got word that that bill was afoot, knew it would fix the problem, and told his buddies in Congress to kill the bill. And you know why? Because he would prefer to run on a problem instead of fixing a problem. And he's running his campaign in a way that he does these rallies where people, by the way, walk out, and does these rallies to try and instill fear around an issue where he actually could be part of a solution, but he chose not to because he prefers to run on a problem instead of fix a problem. And we got to call it out and see it for what it is.
But doesn't the Biden administration have to take some blame for the border, though? A lot of the blame? Because, I mean, the first 3 years, y'all did get a lot of things wrong with the border.
No, Charlemagne, within hours of being inaugurated, the first bill we passed before we did the Inflation Reduction Act, before we did the Bipartisan Infrastructure Act, before we did the Safer Communities Act to deal with gun violence, first thing we dropped was a bill to fix the broken immigration system, which, by the way, Trump did not fix when he was president. And you can look at every step along the way. We then tightened up the asylum application process. We then worked with what we needed to do to secure ports of entry. We did a number of things, including what we did to try and get that border security bill passed. And then also an executive order that has actually reduced significantly the number of illegal crossings and tightened up what needs to happen in between ports of entry. But no, we've been working on it ever since. But
so what went wrong?
But here's what has to happen. Congress has to act to fix the immigration system, and it has been broken for a long time. Congress has to act, but it does not help when finally a bipartisan group got together to fix it. And Donald Trump told them, hold on, don't do that, because it won't help me politically.
Mm-hmm. Why do you allow him to call you the border czar when that's not even that wasn't your
I'm not
role?
giving him permission for that.
Oh, you're right. But, but I mean, you don't push back on it because that wasn't your role.
Fact checkers have made that clear. Look, if I responded to every name he called me, I wouldn't be focused on the things that actually help the American people, and that's my focus.
That is true. Before we go to talk back, I want to say something else. I don't feel like the Biden administration has treated Trump like a real threat to democracy. And that's why America doesn't realize how much of a threat he is. It's one thing to say it, but you have to act on it. Don't you believe Merrick Garland should have moved faster to put Donald Trump in prison for leading an attempted coup in this country?
The Department of Justice has independence in terms of how they make those decisions, as they should. And let's also be very clear.
What do you think?
Donald Trump has been very clear that he would weaponize the Department of Justice against his political enemies. He has been very clear that he would take out the independent folks who are in there and put in there instead his loyalists. So understand, again, you talk about, because this brings back to exactly your point about threats to our democracy. Donald Trump would go into the Department of Justice and manipulate it in such a way that it would be used as a weapon against his political enemies.
Yeah, he's going to lock y'all up if he gets back in office.
Well, by the way, you should look at his words. I don't think that you as a journalist should feel so sure that
100%. I'm out of here.
Journalists, judges, others. And you know who does that? Dictators do that. Other countries do that, which is say that you're going to send, as he has, the military to go and suppress peaceful protesters. That happens in other countries. That's not supposed to happen in America. So do understand when this man says what he says, how that would play out in real time.
So why is it okay for him to say he'll lock up his political opponents, but it's not okay for y'all to say he should be in prison when he's actually committed crimes?
Oh, I've been very clear. I think that the court should handle that. And I'm going to handle November.
The court should handle that. Okay. Let's go to talk back, Eddie. What we got?
President Harris. Our men and women in the military are sent to foreign countries to fight for their freedom. Win or lose, Donald Trump has promised to seek revenge. My question is, will our military be there to fight for our freedom after the election should Trump start another insurrection?
Well, you raise a profound point that is very much a part of this election cycle in terms of what the American people have a choice right now. So, January 6th, Donald Trump incited a violent mob to try and undo the will of the people and undo the results of a free and fair election. That violent mob attacked the United States Capitol. Over 140 law enforcement officers were injured. Some of them were killed. And he has said since then that there will be a bloodbath after this election. He has, on your point about the military, referred to members of our military as suckers and losers. Which is why, by the way, do see the number of military leaders who worked under his administration who are supporting me. And I will point out what everyone knows, which is that the people who worked the closest with Donald Trump when he was president, worked with him in the Oval Office, saw him at play in the Situation Room, his chief of staff, 2 secretaries of defense, his national security advisor, and his former vice president have all said he is dangerous and unfit to serve. Mark Milley, the former chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, most recently articulated exactly that point. And again, you know, here's Charlemagne, one of the things that I think is really ironic but at play. Donald Trump, through his way of trying to name call and demean and divide, tries to project as though those things are a sign of strength. when in fact the man is really quite weak. He's weak. It's a sign of weakness that you want to please dictators and seek their flattery and favor. It's a sign of weakness that you would demean America's military and America's service members. It's a sign of weakness that you don't have the courage to stand up for the Constitution of the United States and the principles upon which it stands. This man is weak and he is unfit.
So why is everybody sitting around acting like Donald Trump isn't going to plan to steal this election if he loses? Like, you know, Republican officials won't certify the results of the election. We know it's Donald Trump's Supreme Court. Why are people acting like this is going to be a free and fair election? And he won't try to steal it.
Well, but those are two different points.
Okay.
So it will be a free and fair election if we, the American people, stand up for that. You know, I see it as this. I think that democracy it's like 2 points of nature. One, there's a fact about a democracy that when it is intact, the strength that it possesses in terms of the protection of people's individual rights and liberties. When a democracy is intact, we protect your rights and your liberties. Strength. Democracy is also very fragile. It will only be as strong as our willingness, we the people, to fight for it. And that, as much as anything, is what's at play in this election. Fight for our democracy. Flawed though it is, imperfect though it may be. Because there are two real paths right now. The man has told you he intends to terminate the Constitution. The man has told you all these things about his disregard and disrespect for your freedoms and liberty, including the right of a woman to make decisions about her own body. And he hand-selected 3 members of the United States Supreme Court with the intention they would do exactly what they did. 1 out of 3 women in America lives in a state with the Trump abortion ban. You know, every state except Virginia in the South has an abortion ban. You know where the majority of black women live? In the South.
Yeah.
In those same states that have some of the highest rates of black maternal mortality. And they want to strut around talking about this is in the interest of women and children, and they've been silent on an issue like black maternal mortality. But I know the people are aware and clear-eyed. And I do believe that on Election Day, and early voting in Michigan starts in 4 days, people are going to go to the polls and they're going to vote to stand up for these principles and to stand up for their rights to freedom and liberty and to live and just be free to be. I believe that.
I want to bring in my guy, Iceware Vezel. He's very politically engaged. I want to ask you a question while he's coming in. It's a quick question. There's a rumor that Janet Jackson is mad at you because you prosecuted her brother, the late, great Michael Jackson. That's on the internet. Clear that up for people.
That's just not true.
I know.
Yeah, on either count.
She's not mad at you?
Well, I mean, I don't know. I don't know. I have not talked to her, but certainly it's not true about her brother.
Vezel.
Charlamagne, what's up? Madam Vice President.
How you doing
today? As we say in Detroit, what up, though? So yesterday I read that there is a new opportunity agenda, a plan for black men, which includes a proposal of forgivable loans up to $20,000 for 1 million black entrepreneurs. What would you say to the people that would consider the timing of this proposal as political timing? And how would you speak to the sentiment that support for black men is only sought out during election cycles and feels that building trust requires consistent engagement and genuine investment into the community outside of election periods and political benefits for politicians? And may view that some people in the Democrat Party use black Americans to play identity politics?
So first of all, thank you for your question and for being here. I've been in this race about 70 days. You can look at all my work before those 70 days to know that what I'm talking about right now is not new and is not for the sake of winning this election. This is about a long-standing commitment, including the work that I've done as vice president and before when I was senator and before that. In fact, a lot of what I'm doing that is about my economic agenda and opportunity economy was born out of the work I did as vice president, before that as senator most recently, to get access to capital for our entrepreneurs. The work that I did in the Senate was about getting a couple billion more dollars into our community banks, and then building on that when I became vice president, I created it. It's called the Economic Opportunity Council, bringing in some of the biggest banks and technology companies to put more into the community banks. And I'm going to tell you one of the reasons why, because I have been aware for years, Black entrepreneurs only get 1% of venture capital funding. Of all the venture capital funding, only 1% goes to Black entrepreneurs. We don't have the same rates of access to capital, be it through family or through connections, which is why I've done the work of putting billions more dollars and working to put billions more dollars into community banks, which go directly to the community. My work around the $20,000 is building on that. And understanding that, I convened, for example, I said this earlier, a group of Black entrepreneurs way before I was running for president in my official office at the White House to hear some of the obstacles that they were facing. And one of them was what we need to do around getting folks the help to just be able to buy the equipment they need to run their business. And oftentimes, we find that when Black entrepreneurs and Black people apply for credit, they're denied at a higher rate than others. We have also seen, and the data proves this, that all of the realities also tend to dissuade Black folks and Black entrepreneurs in particular from even applying for credit. So my point is to work on every way that we can approach the issue to encourage people and to invest in their ambition. Because I know the ambition is there. I know the talent is there. I know the innovation is there. And certainly the hard work ethic. So this is not new work for me. And
you should speak to the American Rescue Plan too, because tens of millions of dollars. I know small businesses in North Carolina small Black businesses that got tens of millions of dollars because of that. I don't hear you speak to that.
That's right, and that was from when we first came in. The American Rescue Plan, the work that we have done, the infrastructure bill. Part of that is we made a decision that we were going to increase the number of federal contracts that go to historically underrepresented businesses. This was way before I was running. This is years ago. Mm-hmm. So this is not new work.
Let's go to the talkback feature.
On several occasions recently, Don Lemon has stated that there's a large group of Black men who believe Donald Trump sent them a personal check during COVID because his name was on it versus it coming from the government as a stimulus check. Can you provide some clarification on this?
Speak to the stimmy.
I'm so glad you raised that. Mm-hmm. So here's what happened. A majority Democratic Congress fought to get those stimulus checks out, fought against resistance by the Trump administration, and won because we had a majority of Democrats in Congress. And that's why those checks went out. As we all know and grew up learning, Congress holds the purse strings. It was Congress that made that decision. And then Donald Trump, never being one to pass up an opportunity to give himself credit when no credit is due, put his name on those checks. And sadly, it resulted in people thinking Donald Trump was responsible for and directly responsible for putting money in their pocket, when in fact, it was a Democratic majority Congress that was responsible for those checks going out.
Why is it hard for Democrats to message their wins on the economy? Like, since World War II, the economy has done better under a Democrat president. Yeah. This is just a historical fact. But for some reason, the narrative is that the economy does better under Republicans. Why do people believe that, and why don't Democrats push back on that narrative more?
Well, I think that part of the issue is that Democrats probably talk about it more in terms of what we are doing for people rather than the economy, when in fact, when you do for people, the economy grows. Mm-hmm. And you are absolutely right, Charlamagne. You will look at the growth of the economy and compare it Democratic and Republican administrations. Democrats have accelerated economic growth. My plan, for example, so some of the smartest economists in the country have reviewed and compared my plan to Donald Trump's plans for the economy. From Goldman Sachs to Moody's, to 16 Nobel laureates, and even most recently the Wall Street Journal. And in comparing our two plans, the net result is my plans will strengthen the economy, his plans will weaken the economy. Their reports come back and include the fact that Donald Trump's plans for the economy would accelerate inflation and invite a recession by the middle of next year. My plans would strengthen the economy as a whole. You look at under what we've been doing, you look at the stock market as one of the strongest it's ever been. Wages have outpaced inflation. Inflation is going down to, I think it's now the most recent number is 2.4%. So, but those are, nobody wants to hear an Econ 101 lecture, right? But the reality of it, to your point, is that under Democratic rule, the economy gets strengthened. And certainly when you look at my plan for my presidency, it will strengthen the economy and it will help people. And as per the conversation we've been having today, perhaps the issue is that I'm going to always think about it in the context of how am I helping working people? How am I helping families? How am I helping people in the middle class? How am I helping people who have been without access, having access? That's how I talk about it. But my plan is about strengthening the economy. And I know when you strengthen the economy, that's how you do it. You do it by investing in the middle class. Let me tell you the contrast. Donald Trump thinks about the economy based on what he has done and will do, cutting taxes for billionaires and the biggest corporations. That's how he thinks about the economy. He thinks about the economy not about middle class people trying to not just get by but get ahead. No, he wants to stop Medicare from being able to negotiate drug prices down from the big pharmaceutical companies.
We got a couple more questions. I want to get my man Eric Thomas in here because we only got like a few more minutes. But I do want to say President Obama was out there last week waving his finger at black men. When are Liz Cheney and Hillary Clinton going to wave their finger at white women? When are Bill Clinton and Joe Biden going to wave their finger at white men? Because 52% of white women voted for Trump in 2016. 55% voted for Trump in 2020. They all voted against their own interests. When the finger waving going to start at them?
Well, thank you for highlighting that. I do have the support of over 200 Republicans who worked for various administrations, including everyone going back to Ronald Reagan, to the Bushes, to John McCain and Mitt Romney, and including Liz Cheney. And I'm very proud to have her support. And I believe that many of them who may have voted for Trump before are supporting me because they know the stakes are so high in terms of our very democracy and rule of law. And
so the finger wagging should start today or tomorrow.
Well, I think what is happening is that we are all working on reminding people of what is at stake, and that is very important.
Eric, real quick, we only got a few minutes.
Only got a few minutes. Thank you, Madam Vice President, for having me. Thank you, Charlamagne the God. So as an employee of a mission-driven nonprofit bank, I appreciate the efforts in that bank. I work with Invest Detroit. But as chief storyteller of the city of Detroit, I spend a lot of time dispelling information about the city of Detroit. Yeah. And so I'm sure for those of us who are like me, if Donald Trump doesn't like Detroit so much, he's not welcome back. Now,
But okay, I don't want to interrupt you.
I
don't know if everybody knows what you're talking about. Okay, go on.
You can get into it. I just wanted to say that we know that there's been a lot of conversation about growing the middle class, but black men have been taken out of the workforce for a myriad of systemic reasons, from mass incarceration to racial bias, fear-mongering. We know that black men are not criminals. They are criminalized. And that has taken black men out of the home, has taken wealth out of the home. And so especially in a city with such high poverty, I've heard a lot about middle class, but I would love to hear more about stair-stepping from poverty into middle class so they can take advantage of the opportunities and the policies you're talking about.
That's right, and that's real. So, for example, the child tax credit. When we did it, when I first became vice president, we half. And when you deal with poverty for a child, that's about the whole family, right? When you look at the work that we have done that has been about dealing with prescription medication for our seniors, black people are 60% more likely to get diagnosed with diabetes. And when you look at what people are in terms of on the verge of bankruptcy because of medical bills and medical debt, that's very real. So us capping the cost of something like insulin and prescription medication, not to mention the work that I've been doing to ensure that medical debt does not get included on your credit score. Because medical debt comes about because of a medical emergency. Nobody invites it upon themselves. And back to the point about history and the reality of life, we also know the real disparities around access to meaningful health care, which are more likely to result in people facing chronic illness and in medical emergency. So my work has been and included working to get medical debt not be on your credit score so that that thing you did not invite upon yourself would not be the reason that you can't get a lease on an apartment or anything else. We have to deal with child poverty. We have to deal with poverty, period. And there are many specific ways to do it, including dealing with getting resources into the community that alleviate the burdens that hold people down. And but back to Detroit. Can you imagine you go to a city and you say you want the votes of those people, and then you disparage the city.
Damn.
And that's what he did in Detroit. And he has a tendency to mention cities that either have a historically black majority population or
We've been listening to the feed provided from this town hall, Vice President Harris with Charlemagne the God, a prominent radio host. You're watching The Beat with Ari Melba here on MSNBC. Charlemagne had said on that feed that they had a few minutes left. As you can hear along with us, we at MSNBC are playing this, and if we get the feedback, we'll bring it back to you. I also want to tell you here on tonight's episode of The Beat, we're going to be discussing some of those key moments and highlights from that interview, which was a big part of the Harris Blitz today that I'm going to talk to you about. So again, if you've been listening along with us, we were told there were a couple minutes left. We lost the audio feed there from the Breakfast Club, a town hall in Detroit with radio host Charlemagne the God, some other local leaders from Detroit, and the vice president. Let me get right into it with you because I've got more to say about and more to report about what's going on in Detroit, as well as a very big set of developments tonight. I can tell you voting now has started in Georgia, the battleground, which proved key to President Biden's victory, the Biden-Harris campaign's victory that put her in the position to now be this close to the presidency. It was also key, as you might recall, to Democrats' Senate control. And now, tonight, for the first time, we're reporting over 250,000 people today alone voted in Georgia. That is actually, if it sounds like a lot, the most ever on day one of early voting there. That is a state that was, of course, very close. When we tell you about early voting, we are telling you something about civic involvement, about high interest and turnout. I want to be clear, we are not telling you what that means about where the votes went today. They will not be tallied until Election Day. Voting is available, though, in over a dozen states now. We've been covering that. Over 5 million people, I can tell you, have voted nationwide. I'm going to continue to track that number for you here on The Beat because it shows participation. I can also tell you that the Harris campaign thinks if they get really high participation, it'll be good for them. But again, this is a sign of what's happening. And what you see on your screen is a clash that was underscored by what you just heard moments ago, Kamala Harris on that big Detroit stage for a big appearance, the town